So I don't know if any of you have ever saw Lost on a Mountain in Maine. It's a movie. I believe it's on Netflix. Or any of you have ever heard of the story of Donn Fendler, which is what the movie's about. And there's also a book as well. But today, I wanted to go over that story and how crazy it really is. So, Mount Katahdin, it's the highest peak in Maine, and it's also the northern terminus of the Appalachian Trail. The story Lost on a Mountain in Maine actually occurs in 1939 and is the true story of a young man by the name of Donn Fendler, who at the time was only 12 years old. So one day in July 1939, Don's dad decided to take him and his brother and a guide to go and summit Mount Katahdin as an adventure for his boys. What ensued after that is a pretty crazy story. As they're coming up the mountain, as a lot of times happens in the Appalachians, if you know, a storm kind of came into the area, and they had some dense fog to deal with, some rain, and ultimately what happened is 12-year-old Donn Fendler was separated from the party, from his dad and his brother. So he ultimately got lost. I really can't find out where on Katahdin, but somewhere close to the summit, Donn actually got separated and lost. After frantically trying to find Donn, his dad and the guide pretty quickly decided to try to get the authorities involved. Donn, however, was lost and began trying to kind of orient himself and find his way out on his own, because Donn had spent a lot of time as a Boy Scout, and he did have a pretty decent set of outdoor skills and survival skills. So he knew how to orientate himself and was really just trying to get back to his family, or maybe even get back to the car or whatever he was doing. But what happened was Donn got really lost, and I mean really lost. And if you've ever been in the Baxter State Park area or around Mount Katahdin, it is a pretty expansive patch of wilderness. So you could imagine a 12-year-old boy lost alone in 1939, really with inappropriate clothing on. Donn had tennis shoes on at the time. He was not prepared to be lost in the woods that particular day. Some of the crazier parts of this story is Donn actually stayed lost for 9 days with no food or water, basically living off what he could find and what he had on him, which was not much, just basically his clothes. So 9 days alone in 1939 as a 12-year-old boy. The crazier part about this is during the duration of that 9 days, Donn covered something around 80 miles of walking. 80 miles of walking. That is crazy for a 12-year-old boy, especially in 1939, with no marked trails, really, or anything to go off of. However, Donn said later in an interview I watched with him that he knew if he got to like a stream or a river, which he did, and if he followed that, eventually it would lead him somewhere. So again, he was going back to some of the things that he had learned in the Boy Scouts. Donn's ordeal actually attracted nationwide attention. There was even a story in the New York Times, and pretty much everybody in the whole country was watching this situation unfold via newspapers and radio, because it was a pretty big deal at the time. And like I said, it lasted for 9 days. So there was a lot of what was media coverage back then on this situation. On the 9th day, Donn actually stumbled onto a hunting camp after, again, walking some 80 miles in the Maine wilderness. And luckily that hunting camp was inhabited. Yeah, there was people there at the time. So finally, after those 9 days, Donn had found his way out of the woods and had found somebody to help him. The people at the camp that Donn found said he was very dirty, completely covered in bug bites, and Donn had lost a astonishing 16 pounds, which if you figure like the average 12-year-old, let's just say the average 12-year-old in 1939 was 110 to 120 pounds. That's over 10% of his body weight in just 9 days. Of course, I guess that's completely plausible if he walked 80 miles. Other than his appearance and some of the superficial issues that he had, Donn was actually completely okay, but did get taken to a local hospital to get checked out. During Donn's ordeal and the search for Donn, there was literally hundreds of people involved in the search for him, and even President Roosevelt at the time had offered his help to help bring Donn home. Now, Donn later on, after his ordeal, wrote the book Lost on a Mountain in Maine, which is now a movie. Like I said, you guys should really watch it. I did watch the movie and kind of paired it together with some of the facts that I have, and the movie is actually very accurate. So it's a great movie to watch to just get an idea of what it was probably like to be that badly lost in the wilderness. And really, it's a complete miracle that the situation didn't get worse or turn out worse for Donn. The fact that he was able to survive with his wits and determination is pretty amazing, because I think most people would have not made an 80-mile journey with no food or water. Donn did find a few things to eat that he knew were safe to eat in the woods. If you read his book, he'll talk a little bit about that. But I also think it's neat that lots of Maine school children are given that book to tell the story of Donn as a 12-year-old boy, basically kind of teaching perseverance and willpower. So it's a pretty neat story for everybody really to read, because it's astonishing that he was able to survive that. Because the weather conditions and the wilderness in Maine, if you've never visited, can be fairly inhospitable if a person even has the correct gear to be out there. So I can't imagine being out there in that situation with virtually nothing but your willpower and what you know. Donn Fendler did eventually pass away at the age of 90 years old. So he made it to 90 years old, probably because of his determination and willpower. He did pass away in 2016. So if you guys get a chance, that's a great book if you enjoy stuff like that to pick up. Or you can go on to Netflix and watch the movie. I think it's on Netflix. I may be telling you guys completely wrong, but I'm almost positive that movie is available on Netflix and Prime and most streaming platforms. But yeah, so if you get a chance, go watch Lost on a Mountain in Maine, and you'll feel a lot worse about your 2-mile hike in the woods today. I know I did. But yeah, it's a great story. So until next time, guys, see ya.